Welcome back to Business Week on Arise News. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Gabriel Topman, business growth consultant, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Welcome to the show, Gabriel, for the first time.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Well, before we get into these stories you picked, I wanted us to talk a bit about the bankers' dinner yesterday and Cardoso, CBN governor. He was conferred with an honorary fellowship of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. But more important, the big spotlight was his speech. Were there some sort of standout things that he mentioned that really stood out to you?
Yes, well, what I'm particularly very happy with is the number of good news that is going around for the impact of his policy on improvements of results. Okay. That's what stands out to me. That's what I like the most. What
specifically, in terms of his policies? I mean, one of the things they mentioned was that the FX reforms had led to a 72% increase in FX inflows into the country.
Yes. So I picked up that he set $100,000 minimum spend as like the new baseline, like what people should spend on forex. And I noticed that is already working. Okay. So that's what I took from it. I perceived that policy had a big impact.
Okay, all right, great. Well, we'll get into some of the stories you opted for. One of the ones we were looking at, which I mentioned at the top of the show, was the number of self-employed Nigerians, the working population. The NBS says 85.6%. I mean, it seems like news we already know. Why is this so important now? Yes,
I'm glad we're talking about it because this is why I'm here. So I'm a British national and Nigerian, proud Nigerian of origin. And the reason why it's relevant to me is so that people should start by knowing themselves. You see, most results is about what you can control, understanding your strength. And Nigerians are self-starters, go-getters, people who are doing their best. So it's always important to start with knowing yourself, start with yourself, start with your strength, and understand what you have in common. And what we have in common as self-starters, where is self-employment. As a director, we're self-employed. And in Nigeria, even people who are in full-time work actually have a side hustle. Yeah, and that's a form of self-employment. Yeah. So I found that very important to notice and note right at the beginning, because without knowing yourself and without knowing your customer, the audience, how can you really help yourself? You have to really understand yourself in order to get the most out of yourself.
Okay, but looking at the statistic now, it means that there's probably a growing number of people who could also be classed as SMEs, right? People who are running small business. In terms of the general business environment, how supportive do you think it is of self-employment and actually running a small business?
Sure. Supportive of self-employment. I would say self-employment is a world where people are concerned that you have an unfair advantage. You might not be honest about the money that you made and all these things. And there's always a back and forth between governments and people who want to be tax efficient. So that's the biggest challenge. Now, supporting self-employment, it's a matter of platform. For example, infrastructure, making sure that the internet works, making sure light works, making sure things are working. It's very important because if these things are not working, the knock-on effects is real. Another thing is to do with the quality of education that you're making available to your people. If they really understand themselves and know what they're doing, they will make better decisions. For example, one of my mentees is an AI specialist. He's incredibly good at it. And I can see that the environment holds him back. But it's my luck because I get to support him, invest in him, and, just clear the fog. But the environment still plays a major role in what he can produce. So it's very important that the environment is not stifling people. It's not holding people back. Because if it's holding the people back, it's holding itself back. It's like trying to run a marathon and then amputating your own legs. Okay. You have to know what you're doing.
Okay, thank you for your perspective. The ICT sector is one of the statistics that was released by the National Bureau of Statistics. It says its contribution to GDP has declined, to real GDP, by 16.53%. You were just talking about AI, so this is really interesting. Do you know what is accounting for this decline in GDP? Its contribution to GDP?
Yes, I would like to think that the increase in oil production and the other things that are working in the country might just be reducing the significant impact that it's having. That's what I would like to think. From my experience in the good time I've spent in Nigeria, what I've noticed is that people like MTN, they're doing quite well, and they're quite impressive. So it's a matter of time. So you'll be surprised that next year the figures will be different.
Okay, so which sectors do you expect to increase in contribution to the country's GDP?
So that's the reason why I picked the first topic of knowing self. So knowing Nigeria's oil production, knowing that what they're doing now, what they're trying to scale, which goes into the other headline as to progress in the oil space. I believe that that is something that can give Nigeria the volume that it really wants. So I think that's a major thing to look forward to and that you can rely on.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to another story, our final story. Port Harcourt refinery has begun loading fuel, obviously, and many Nigerians have been, waiting for this moment for a long time. But obviously, the NNPC has said this is just a preliminary boost and that we expect to see it fully operational eventually. I mean, what significance does this have in terms of full supply, fuel distribution, full pricing? How is this likely to shape the market outlook downstream?
I'm excited for Nigeria. That's how I feel. I believe that Nigeria is going in the right direction because I've been listening. I do care for Nigerians a lot. I have a Prince origin, so I have a sentimental connections in this country that makes me really want to see this country doing great. That's one of the reasons I'm here. And what I see and what I've heard from one of my clients as well, who is in the agriculture space, he manufactures Gary, is that when I ask people, why is the cost of your food so high? They go, that's what we're getting it for. Oh, this cost of fertilizer. And if you look at it, this oil production, fertilizers are one of the main outputs of good refinery. Okay. So if you're in charge of your refinery, you can solve your problems. So you can start producing fertilizers cheaper, for example, and that will have knock-on effect on your economy. So the future is looking great for Nigeria, and I am qualified to tell you that.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show, Gabriel Topman. It was great to have you.
Awesome.
Thank you.